Today I'm going to talk about some chord theory. I'm going to explain how different chords are built. So we'll start with the basic building blocks, the notes. So we've got A to G, and they're spaced apart like this. A, B, there's no gap between B and C. And then D, E, no gap between E and F, and G. And this pattern just continues, starting again at A, and just keeps climbing up. And then in the gaps between these notes, they're either called sharp or flat versions of the notes to either side. So this is now starting to resemble a piano keyboard or a guitar fretboard, where each note is a semitone apart. And you can see there's only 12 different notes, and then the pattern just repeats. Although all these repeats keep going up an octave in pitch, but essentially they're the same notes as far as making chords is concerned. We only need these 12. So the next thing to look at is the major scale. And this is defined as when the gap between certain notes follows this pattern. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So let's say that we wanted to make a major scale and we want to start with the note G. It's going to be a G major scale. So starting with G, we're then going to skip a tone. So that's 2 spaces, and that'll give us an A note. And then another tone will be a B note. And now a semitone, that's just a half step. So 1 space to a C note. Next, it's a tone to D, a tone to E, a tone to F sharp, and finally a semitone brings us back to G, and that's an octave higher, but it's the same note as our root note. If we number these notes we've chosen, we get 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the octave. And these are the notes of our major scale, in this case, a G major scale. And if you sing this, it's going to sound like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, where the do is the note G in pitch. So if we choose another example, say the key of C, the next note is a tone, D, a tone to E, a semitone to F, a tone to G, a tone to A tone to B, and a semitone brings us back to C. And once again, we've chosen just 7 notes, plus repeating the first note makes the octave. And here you can see in the major scale of C, all the 8 notes contain no sharps or flats. So this is the only key that does this, so that's why it always gets used as examples for beginners. It just looks simpler without the sharps and flats. But if we took this pattern on the continuum, we could place it anywhere and it would be just as simple. Here I've started in F, so the major scale is F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. If I started in A, we'd get A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A. And if I slid up to E flat, we'd get E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, and E flat, making up the major scale. So this pattern of 8 notes is always the same, regardless of what key we're in. It'll be a major scale. And we then use this scale to select the notes to make our chords. So for a major chord, the formula is to choose the first note, or root note, and then add the 3rd and the 5th. And we could also consider the 8th to be part of the major chord, but it's just the same note as the root note, an octave higher. If we put this pattern against our spectrum of notes, we can see that if I'm starting with D as the root, we'd get a major chord with D, F sharp, and A. With an F sharp as the root note, I get F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp to make an F sharp major chord. And a C is C, E, and G. For a minor chord, our formula pattern is going to be the 1, the flattened third, and the 5th. And again, we could include the octave. And you can see that the minor is only different to a major chord by 1 note. They either have a third or a flattened third. So, for example, here's an E minor chord. Starting on E, we get E, G, and B. Or for a D minor chord, we get the notes D, F, and A, just by using our minor formula. A B flat would be B flat, D flat, and F. So let's look at some other types of chords and how they're related. A 6th chord, the pattern is just like a major chord, the 1, the 3, and the 5, and then we simply add a 6th. So you can see from a C major chord, we're adding an A note to make a C6. For a G6, it's a G major chord with an added E note as the top 6. And for an A6, it's just like an A major plus an F sharp note. The formula for a 7th chord is similar. It's a major chord, 1, 3, and 5, plus a flattened 7th. Because this notation is actually short for a dominant 7th chord, and the flat 7th note is very dominant. We use 7th chords all the time. So for a major 7th then, it's a major chord, 1, 3, 5, plus the actual 7th, a major 7th note, not a flat one. And just notice how these 3 chords are really similar. Basically, they're a normal major chord, and the only difference is the final note, which are each only a fret apart. It's also good to realise that if you don't know the top note to play, you could just play the major chord, the 1, 3, and the 5, and all your notes would be correct ones. But it's quite easy to figure out the top note. We often know which note is added to make a dominant 7th chord. So if you just started with your 7th, but if you flatten just that note, you'll get a 6th chord, or if you sharpen it, you'll get a major 7th. And that major 7th note would be just 1 semitone flatter than the octave note. When we, in another video, when I look at actual positions on the ukulele or the guitar, knowing this is going to help us figure out these 3 types of chords. And then for a minor 6th chord, it's just like combining a 6th with a minor. You have a flattened third with a 6th. For a minor 7th, it's just a 7th chord with a flattened third. And you can have a minor major 7th chord, which is a minor chord with the major 7th note added. So again, it's all very similar, and if you're in doubt, just play the minor chord, the 1, the flattened third, and the 5th. Okay, so now we'll look at some slightly more advanced chords. A sus2 chord, and this just means a major chord with a 1, 3, and 5, but instead of the 3, you're going to change that to a 2. Now we already know a minor chord is the 1, 3, 5, but we change the third to a flattened third. And here's the major chord that we know, the 1, 3, and 5. And a sus4 chord is like a major chord, but instead of the third, we make it a 4th. So just have a look at how these 4 chords are related. The root and the 5th never change, and it's just the middle note that goes from a 2 to a flat 3 to a 3 to a 4. Well, we already know the majors and minors pretty well, so the sus2 and the sus4 are just moving that middle note a bit further up or down. And I'll just go a little bit into some more advanced chords. Here's a major chord pattern for reference. An augmented chord means that we use the root, the third, and the sharpened 5th. And then if you take note of the 8th, which is just starting again with the root note, see how the distance between the 3 notes is exactly equal. If we put it on the keyboard, a C augmented is a C, E, and G sharp. But if I move the pattern up to E augmented, the notes are E, G sharp, and C. And then a G sharp augmented chord is G sharp, C, and E. And these three chords are essentially the same, they're just in different order. I can keep moving this pattern higher, and the notes are all spaced 4 frets apart, and the chords C augmented, E augmented, or G sharp augmented are all comprised of the same C, E, and G sharp notes. I could also group together the augmented chords that are a semitone higher. The A augmented, the C sharp augmented, and F augmented, consisting of the notes A, C sharp, and F. And then the next group, 1 fret higher, would consist of a B flat, D, and G flat, which gives us either B flat augmented, D augmented, or G flat augmented, which are all the same chord, just different inversions. And finally, B augmented, D sharp augmented, and G augmented are also all the same, consisting of the notes B, D sharp, and G. And then we've covered all options. So there's only 4 different augmented chords, even though they each have 3 different names. And the name of the notes is the same as the names of the 3 similar chords. So if you sharpen an augmented chord once, you'll get the next group of 3. If you sharpen it a second time, you'll get the third group. If you sharpen it a third time, you'll get the last group. And then if you sharpen it anymore, you're just going to be back to where you started. So you only ever need 4 positions, and you can cover any augmented chord. All of this is just from taking a major chord and sharpening or augmenting the 5th note. Diminished 7th chord is a bit stranger, but it's got similar attributes. It consists of a root note, a flattened 3rd, a flattened 5th, and the 6th. Now, technically, for weird maths reasons that I don't get because I don't quite understand it, it's a double flat 7th, but essentially it means the same note, number 6. And you can see that all these notes are also spaced equally apart. There's 4 notes this time, 3 frets apart. So a diminished 7th chord has 4 names. This is a B diminished 7th, but it could also be D diminished 7th, F diminished 7th, or G sharp diminished 7th, because those are the notes. And if you play any of the 4 diminished chords, you're just rotating different octaves of those same 4 notes. And then the next group are 1 fret higher, C diminished 7th, E flat diminished 7th, G flat diminished 7th, or A diminished 7th. And then this pattern just repeats using the same 4 notes. And then there's only one group left, the notes B flat, D flat, E, and G. And these make up a B flat diminished 7th, a D flat diminished 7th, an E diminished 7th, and G diminished 7th, which are all the same chord. So there are 3 different diminished 7th chords, all 1 fret apart. That's pretty complicated. I'm going to use these same diagrams just to briefly explain a couple of other complex chords. And I'm not going to go into huge detail, but it's just helpful to get an understanding of just what these chords mean and how they work. So let's say you see a 9 or a 13. What does that mean? Well, remembering the formula for a major scale, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. We start with C, and your 8 notes of the scale are going to be tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And now we're on a C note, our number 8 note. It's the same value as our number 1. So we could essentially start again. The next note will be a tone above. So note 9 is going to be a D. Note 10 will be a tone. Note 11 will be a semitone, 12 is a tone, 13 is a tone, 14 is a tone, and the semitone brings us back to another octave at note 15. So 2 octaves is not 16 notes because the C in the middle got counted twice. It's the end of the first octave and the start of the second one. So now, looking at this double octave group of 15 notes, you can probably guess how we're going to make bigger chords. A ninth chord is like a dominant seventh chord. The 1, the 3, the 5, the flattened seventh, and then we just add the ninth on top of that. So if it was a C9, we'd be playing essentially a C7 chord with a high D on top. And notice the D, number 9, is the same note as the D number 2. So it's going to sound a little bit like a sus2 chord. In fact, it's a little bit like a mix of a sus2 and a 7th chord together. A major ninth chord would be the 1, 3, 5, the actual 7th, and the 9th. So it's a major 7th chord plus a 9th on top. Makes a major 9th. An add 9 chord, if you ever see that, however, that's just a major chord plus a 9. It skips the 7 altogether. So for ukuleles, because we can only play a total of 4 notes at once, we're going to have to play an add 9 when we see these types of chords. And here you can see I've put a C chord, which we could play with the open G, C and E strings, and then our finger would also be on the 5th fret to play a high D instead of the high C we normally play on the 3rd fret. But again, with these chords, just note that you can always just play a major chord, 1, 3, 5, and you wouldn't be wrong. If you can add the other top notes, that's just a bonus. An 11th chord, if it was on a piano, 1, 3, 5, flat 7th, a 9, and then an 11. And notice that this 11th note is, here it's an F, it's the same as our 4th. So it's going to sound a bit like a sus4 chord. And because this note is going to clash a bit with the 3rd, often the 3rd gets left out. Take it away, and to make it simpler again, often the 5th is also left out. So you just get the root note and then the most distinctive notes, the flat 7th, the 9th and the 11th. In this case of a C11, it's the root note, the B flat, the D and the F. And then a 13th chord just continues the same pattern. On top of the 11th, we're adding a note at number 13. But in common practice, we'd omit the 5th, the 9th, and the 11th. Losing these 4 notes is an approximate 13th chord. Although you can tell that there starts to be a bit more and more variations where you might keep some other notes and instead, or maybe the 7th might become a major 7th, etc. But in any case, you can see that with all these higher numbers, higher numbered chords, you can always just play the major and you won't be wrong. And you could also just substitute a 7th chord and all the notes would be in the chord. So I hope that this structure has made it a little bit clearer what all the numbers mean. So whenever you see a sus2, a sus4, an augmented chord with the 5th, a 6th, a 7th, a major 7th, a 9th, an add 9th, 11th, 13th, or diminished 7th, or any other numbered combinations, hopefully it might not be so confusing and you might actually even be able to work them out. We're going to use this in when I show some of the other video demos. Thanks for watching.